should have got an outline in your bulletin today. I encourage you to take some additional notes as we look at the subject of fear. We'll start with an illustration of a hot air balloon. You have that hot air balloon? There it is. John Ortberg tells a story of his wife wanted to do something special for her birthday, and so she decided to line him up a hot air balloon ride. It was not as many people in as this. There was just two couples. So they arrived there. They got in the balloon. They shared their backgrounds and what they did for a living with the other couple. They had just dawned. They were in California. They could see all the way from the coast to them. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. But he experienced one emotion he said he was surprised to experience. Anybody have any idea what it might have been?
Fear.
Fear. He got a little nervous. He said he thought those baskets came up to your chest. This basket only came up to his knees. So he's holding on as tightly as he could. He noticed someone else in the basket holding even tighter than he was because his wife did not like heights. In fact, as they were flying over the area there, she loves horses. They passed a horse farm. He pointed it out to her, and she wouldn't even turn her head to look because she said, "Oh, it's going to be." He said, after a while, he said, I decided that get to know the guy who was flying the balloon. He said, maybe that would take away some of my fear if I knew he had previous job had been a neurosurgeon or an astronaut or something like that. So he said, he asked him, what did you do for a living before you started flying balloons? He said, well, I never really had a job. I just surfed a lot, he said. And then one day I got drunk and I wrecked my truck with my brother in there. He got hurt. And he felt better watching air balloons, so I decided to start flying air balloons. He said, oh, no. He said, I should have known when his first words were, well, dude, it's like this. He said, the truth was, we had placed our lives and destinies in the hands of the pilot. We'd put our life and destiny in the hand of this young pilot. His wife looked at him and said, you mean to tell me? Oh, he said this too. He said, when we begin the descent, it might get a little rough because I've never flown this air balloon before, and I'm not sure how it's going to do going down. The wife said to him, wait a second. You telling me that we have a pilot here who's never flown this balloon before? He took this job because he got drunk and wrecked his truck, and he's not sure how we're going to land. He said that finally the wife of the other couple said the only thing they said in the whole time they were there. She said, you're a pastor, do something religious. So he said, I took up an offering. Technically, as believers, the truth should be we have placed our lives and destinies in the hand of the pilot also. Major fears. I'm going to put a couple up here on the screen for you, if we can get them up here. We'll start with thanatophobia. It'll come up eventually, I think. Thanatophobia. Anybody have that? It's the fear of dying. The Greek word for death is thanatos. Thanatophobia. Second one, ailurophobia. That's fear of cats. Fear of cats. I told Joey I should have put a picture of me. I have a picture of me with a huge, wild, not a mountain lion, but a cougar. He's hanging from the ceiling. My neighbor, when I lived in British Columbia, was trapping. He got this in his trap one day. He didn't expect it. And so he shot it, and there it was hanging there together. I said, I was going to put that picture up there and say, this is why I have fear of cats. Orphidiophobia. Anyone know what that is? Fear of snakes. Anybody have the fear of snakes? Okay, some of you have that. Paraskevidecatreophobia. Anybody have that? Paraskevidecatreophobia. It's a fear of Friday the 13th. I don't know why. Climacophobia. Climacophobia is people afraid of going up the stairs. Okay, I got three more on the next slide if you can come up here. This next one here, some of you may have. Joey actually said this is one of hers, this next one. Wow. Come on up. I had a fear this wasn't going to work well today. While we're waiting, I'll talk about the bottom two. Cathedrophobia. Cathedrophobia. Joey has a little bit of that. It's crossing bridges. That bridge in Baltimore that goes over the... That's really long. She gets really nervous on that bridge. She won't drive there. And then there's pantophobia. Anybody have pantophobia? That's a fear of everything. Pantophobia. Okay, the one that didn't come up was one some of you may have.
Arachnophobia.
No. Well, that might be
Fear of spiders.
Spiders, that's right. No, this was longo sermon phobia. Longo sermon phobia. People have a fear of somebody's going to preach a really long sermon. Joey said she has a little bit of that. Well, okay, I made that one up, but I know some of you may have that. We're going to be in Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, verse 35 to 37. Jesus has been investing in the lives of his disciples. They're learning as they go. He's training them because when he leaves, he wants them to carry on the mission of making disciples of all people. So one day, verse 35 of Mark chapter 4, they're by the lake of Galilee. They're on one side and want to pass to the other side. And it says, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, teacher, don't you care if we drowned? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. And he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you have no faith? Do you have no faith? Truth is, life is full of storms, isn't it? All kinds of storms. They come in different shapes and sizes. Christians still get cancer. Christians still have automobile accidents. Many years ago, I taught a class for a native couple planning a church in the western part of British Columbia. 2 weeks before I got there to teach, the baby died of SIDS. And they were heartbroken. It was a storm they were going through. Storms come in different shapes, different sizes. Some have spouses who are unfaithful. Some have financial difficulties. There are Christians today in many countries around the world who are being persecuted for their faith. Many in China have been put into prison for their faith. Loved ones are lost. Some are victims of crime. Some people lose their jobs. Fear not is the most repeated command in the scripture. It's repeated 366 times. That's one for every day and an extra one for leap year. 366 times God said, fear not, because we struggle with the whole idea of fear. So first I want to look at a great fear in verse 38. Verse 38, that day, verse 38 says, a furious squall. Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. Disciples woke him and said to him, teacher, I want to start with the great storm first. The great storm, verse 35. That day when the disciples came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat. A fierce storm. In Matthew, he repeats that as well. Another time, Jesus' disciples were in a storm. You remember that one? He walks across the water during a storm. And they were frightened to see him coming. But one disciple was what? Willing to get out of the boat. Now, when he saw the wind, what happened? Jesus, please save me. He went down. But at least he got out of the boat. Storms come in different shapes, different sizes. Great storm followed by a great fear. Don't you care if we drown? Fear is this internal warning cry that danger is nearby. It's an emotional response. Why are you so afraid? Everybody has different kinds of fears. Normal fear. Fear acts as a warning system. Sometimes that can be good, just so we don't make some unwise choices. Abnormal fear is exaggerated and irrational. Of all the different temperaments, the temperament most prone to fear are thinkers, because they just worry about everything. If anybody is panthophobic, it could be a thinker. They just fear all kinds of different things. I couldn't help but think, you don't have to turn to it, but in the Old Testament, Numbers 13, when they finally got to the Promised Land, they sent spies in to check out the land. When the spies came back, they reported how it was. The spies came back, and here's their report. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. They reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. I mean, they had grapes so big they had to put it on a post with 2 men carrying it. The fruit was amazing in the land. They said, we went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there, there was a but. Yeah, the fruit is great, but the people who live there are powerful. The cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. Then Caleb, one of the faithful, said, wait a second, we should go in there and take it. God will help us. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are giant size. We seemed like grasshoppers in their eyes. Grasshoppers. Yeah, they were so big we felt like a grasshopper. I mean, they were scared to death. The land was awesome. God said he would give them the land, but what happened? When they got in there and saw the walls of the cities and saw these large, they said, no. One of the effects of fear is it causes us to overestimate our obstacles and underestimate the power of our God. And God said he's going to give them the land. What happens with fear is we start believing God's not big enough to handle what our situation is. Whether we lose our job, whether it's doctor's report, or whatever it is, we think, okay, God can't handle this. We don't say that. So they acted irrationally that night. Sometimes fear can cause people to act irrationally. Chapter 14 says, that night all the people of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. And they grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And they said, if only we had died in Egypt or in this desert. Come on. Man, I wish we'd only died in Egypt. Then we wouldn't be here in this fearful situation. Think about what you're saying. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to do what? Go back to Egypt. Fear can cause us to do some stupid things, doesn't it? They moaned and they grumbled and they complained. They said, why don't we just go on back where we came from? They were miserable down there. Life was terrible there. They wanted out of there, but all of a sudden, they want to go back. Why? Because of fear. Their God wasn't big enough to handle. Not only that, they forget their past. God's past. Good things he's done for them. Verse 11, the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? What had God already done for them? Remember all the plagues God put on Egypt? Remember what he did when they finally left there? All the firstborn died in Egypt, but their firstborn didn't die. Know what happened when they came to the Red Sea and the Egyptians were behind them and they said, oh no, we're done here. And God says, just hold on a second. And Moses parted the waters and they walked through and dried out and they saw all the Egyptians. They forgot all of those powerful things God did. All of a sudden, God wasn't big enough now because we felt like grasshoppers. And sometimes that happens to us too. Think of all the times God has been faithful in your life in the past. And all of a sudden something comes up and you say, oh no, how am I going to get through this? Hey, remember, the God who has been faithful all along will continue to be faithful. They didn't remember that. He says, I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. God and Moses pleaded for the people. The other thing it does, it causes us to miss opportunities sometimes. Fear. Fear can cause us to miss opportunities. The Lord replied, verse 20, the same chapter, I have forgiven them as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt, in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one will ever get to see the inside of the promised land. They missed an opportunity because they felt that God wasn't big enough to handle their situation at that point in time. Even though they'd seen God do all the miracles up to this point, they were going to miss. Even Paul had some fears. Paul once said, conflicts without, fears within. Here's the lie of fear. God's not big enough to take care of me. Listen to this quote from John Ortberg. Fear has created more practicing heretics than bad theology ever has. For it makes us live as though we serve a limited, finite, partially present, semi-competent God. You would never say, I don't really believe in God's power. But sometimes your response to storms in your life says, I don't really believe in God's power. A great calm came in verse 39 and 40. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Still have no faith. Hebrews chapter 11 says, without faith it's impossible to please God. A gal had missed her station on the subway. By the time she realized her mistake, she didn't know what to do. She prayed for safety and some sign of God's presence. This was no hour for a girl like her to be alone in a bad neighborhood on the subway. At the next stop, the doors open. A rough-looking guy gets in, sits down beside her, and she thought, oh no, what's going on here? He took out his harmonica, and he played this song, Be Thou My Vision. It was her mother's favorite song. And she realized, hey, God is still here with me in spite of my fears. Here's the great lesson. God is with me in my storms. He says, then why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? I mean, you've probably all seen this before. Little 2-year-old boy is standing on the edge of a pool. His dad's standing in the water, saying to him, just jump. But he's in this turmoil. Do I jump? Can I really trust? I mean, Dad's been good to me up to this point, but what if he doesn't catch me? And there he's in this tough decision position. Should I jump or not jump? What he determines to do is going to have a huge impact in his life, because if he doesn't jump because of fear, that's going to impact him. If he does jump and realize that, hey, Dad did catch me, I can trust him. What did the balloon riders say? We've really put our future and our lives in the hands of the pilot. And God's your pilot. You can put your life and future into his hands no matter what storm you go through. And you may not be going through a storm right now, but a storm can come up at any time. What's my responsibility in the whole thing? You need to focus on the size of your God. I put it on a magnet. There's some here on the table. Focus on the size of your God, not on the size of your storm. Focus on the size of your God, not on the size of your storm. The most important thing about you is what you really believe to be true about God. What you believe to be true about God impacts your relationship with God. If you believe he's powerful, in control, wise, then when you face fearful things, you can trust him in those things. If you don't think he's there, then you're like the little boy on the side of the pool thinking, well, should I? Well, maybe I shouldn't. If you know Christ your personal Savior, you have never been in a storm alone. And you will never be in a storm alone. I guess we're not getting any pictures, so you have to picture this in your mind. At the climax of the movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, he has to pass 3 supreme tests to reach the Holy Grail and save his father. biggest one is the last one. There's a 100-foot wide gap and 1,000 feet down. And the sign says you need to step out by faith. So he stands on the edge of the thing. You think, nobody's big enough to jump across this. And then he realizes, all I have to do is take the first step. But if I step and nothing holds me, I'm going down. So he goes back and forth. Do I do this or not? And if you've seen the movie, you know what happens. His father says to him, you must believe, boy, you must believe. So he does step out, and an invisible force walks across the chasm. Hebrews says, without faith, it is absolutely impossible to please God. You don't have to have faith to be able to jump the whole thing. You just have to have faith to be willing to take the first step. Oh, he did come up. Good. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. What is it for you? Stepping up to serve? You've been asked to serve, but you're not sure whether you should serve or not? Is it fearful for you to invite one of your friends, relatives, associates, and neighbors to Christmas? And what if they reject me? Is God challenging your heart to go on a mission trip somewhere in another part of the world, but you think, I'm not sure. I got to fly to do that. Another fear people have is flying. Storms test our faith, and storms grow our faith. Again, the hot air balloon, we had placed our lives in the hands of the pilot. When you face a storm, focus on the size of your God, not the size of your storm. There's a song called Fear No More, Building 429. It says, wishing I could see the finish line, where it ends, where it lands. Guess I lost my vision when the pain set in. Can I believe when I don't see? Can I really let it be out of my hands when it's out of my hands? This isn't what I choose, but it's where I'm finding you. When I'm broken and undone, your mercy's just begun. You overcome my doubt. Your hands are reaching out. You hold me in the storm. Hopefully, we're going to be able to play that song now.